The best game of 2024 is... Sorry, here we go. The best game of 2024 is... What the hell? Okay, let's try this one more time. The best game of 2024 is a point-and-click mystery adventure that I played on Netflix. The Rise of the Golden Idol is a sequel to 2022's The Case of the Golden Idol, both of which were developed by Color Gray Games and published by PlayStack Games. Both of the Golden Idol games are point-and-click mysteries where it's your goal to figure out exactly what happened. You're going to be presented with a scene, and then you have to look at every detail of that scene, use the facts that you find to reverse engineer what happened, and then enter those details into a kind of Mad Lib style notebook. The thing that I didn't expect in the first game, and that's even better in Rise, is that each of these individual scenarios build on one another, and they form a larger overall narrative. You follow the titular Golden Idol, the people that have held it throughout time, and the ways that each of those people found ruin due to their hubris using the idol's magic. Rise of the Golden Idol solves my biggest issue with the first game. In Rise, the game is divided into 5 sections of 4 or so cases, and as you solve each of those cases, the game provides you with a clue as to the greater narrative of that individual section of the game. Then when you've completed all the cases in that section, you solve another puzzle that brings in facts from each of those cases. In the first game, I got all the way to the end before I realized that I was going to need to recall all of those facts, the ones that I'd encountered all the way to the beginning of the game. And I wasn't prepared to think like that. The final puzzle of that game required me to guess a lot until I just stumbled into the right answers. Rise of the Golden Idol not only avoids that mistake, but it makes the rest of the game even more interesting by bringing in that meta layer all the way throughout the game. It guides you through the narrative more deftly and avoids you having to guess, even though the puzzles in this one are sometimes enormous. I played the entirety of Rise of the Golden Idol on my iPad via Netflix games, and if you've got a subscription, I gotta say that using a touchscreen really made this game sing. That said, you can buy the game outright on PC and all 3 major consoles, and it's absolutely worth your time. Rise of the Golden Idol is just the latest in a genre that's become to be known as Metroidvanias, beginning with Lucas Pope's Return of the Obra. The best game of 2024 is a $5 fishing metaverse. Web fishing is a small, open-world, multiplayer fishing game full of secrets and stupid jokes. It was originally made in around 8 days for the Autumn Game Jam on itch by Goodgis, but the version that you can play on Steam is a completely remade game, and it's spectacular. I don't really play games with friends online. The whole idea of finding and asking friends to play with me always felt overwhelming, like I was interrupting their lives with something stupid and unnecessary. There have been exceptions. I played Among Us back when we all did in lockdown, and for a while there, my friends and I had regular Dominion nights. But I'm not the kind of person who logs on the Discord to crank out dailies or climb the ladder with my friends. But I know that video games have become very real shared spaces for people. In the same way that I'll always have the memory of my friends coming over to my house to watch Agatha All Along, many people have memories of the time that they built something together in their friend's Minecraft server. This idea of place memory is something that I've been interested in for a long time. Back in college, I'd often walk through campus listening to podcasts, and I find that if I walked back through a place I'd been before, I might instinctually recall an episode that I'd listened to when walking through that place. That place would become a memory trigger of the sounds and ideas that that podcast had placed in my brain. The idea of sharing a virtual space or building shared place memory of a digital space has the misfortune of being called the metaverse, and being the thing that for like 5 minutes people with too much money thought was going to make them even more money. But the core idea that an online space can feel as emotionally real to us as a physical one, I think is sound. On an episode of Into the Aether, Brendan Bigley called web fishing the only good metaverse, and I haven't been able to stop thinking of it that way. Web fishing is not interested in mining cryptocurrency or extracting value from you or siphoning your data. It's just a goofy little fishing game where you can fish, or you can hunt for treasure with your metal detector, or you can sit on the dock playing guitar. It's a game where the blue mushrooms launch you high into the air and your friends can unlock a boxing glove to punch you into the ocean. It's a game where you can catch several fish that are so big the game can't even properly display them. I only played web fishing twice, but both times ended up being several hours because my friends and I just could not get enough of being in that place together. And that's why it's the best game of 2024. The best game of 2024 is Metaphor ReFantazio. It's not that I don't enjoy fantasy worlds, but the story, characters, and world have to be interesting enough for me to really engage with anything that claims to be fantasy. Now, I love Lord of the Rings, but decades of Tolkien clone fantasy stories have made stories of elves, dwarves, and dragons really just amount to white noise to me. But 3 things happened that made me want to play Metaphor ReFantazio. First is that I played Persona 3 Reload and learned what makes Atlas games great. Second is that many of my friends told me how much they were loving Metaphor's world and characters. And third, maybe the most important, Atlas released a free demo of the prologue. I was about 10 minutes into the game's second mini-dungeon when I decided that I was just going to buy the full game. Metaphor ReFantazio's combat is a new riff on the combat that you might know and love from Persona. You've still got type weaknesses and extra turns when you trigger them, and many of the abilities are named the same or similar to their Persona counterparts. But instead of Persona's one more mechanic, where a character gets another turn when they hit an enemy's weakness, Metaphor uses a system of turn icons. When the enemy finishes their turn, your party has a set of turn icons displayed on the screen, and if you exploit that enemy's weakness, you only lose half of a turn icon. But the next party member still goes next. This sounds like a small change, but physicalizing the turns in the user interface leads to really interesting abilities down the line that I don't want to spoil for you. This change, plus snappy animations, an animation skip feature, and incredible sound design, all lead to Metaphor feeling awesome to play. The party is made up of a cast of characters that could have been rote carbon copies of fantasy tropes, but in every case, they aren't. Even the ones who might seem to fit into typical fantasy story roles have some aspect that elevates them above that comparison. I will admit that this is not my favorite RPG party this year, but it's also been an absurd year for RPGs, so that should say nothing about what Studio Zero have done by crafting characters players will surely cherish for decades. Where this game's combat and characters come together, though, is in archetypes. Metaphor ReFantazio is a game about fantasy. So when it came to create a job system, the developers looked to the same fantasy archetypes that they eschewed in character writing. If you want Hulkenberg, the knight, to learn a bit of magic, all you need to do is level her up as a mage for a bit. And if you want to make Hyasmay, the thief, into a dodge tank, you can level him up as a faker and learn an ability that I also dare not spoil in this video. This archetype build system truly unlocked Metaphor for me. I've seen similar job systems in Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, but they never seemed interesting enough for me to fully engage with. Knowing what I know now about how Metaphor's archetypes work, I can see myself going back and having a much better time with those games' job systems. I do take a bit of issue with how Metaphor ReFantazio tries to be about something and how its mechanics and story just don't always do a great job of reinforcing that something. I wrote a bit over on matthorton.live about how the game occasionally fails to use the freedoms fantasy stories provide to actually imagine anything new when it comes to solving the harder problems of politics. But that doesn't keep me from considering a New Game Plus playthrough, or wishing for a DLC set in a location that the game strangely ignores. Metaphor ReFantazio sits just barely in the back of my mind while I'm playing literally anything else. It's only a matter of time before I jump back in. Also, the music rules. The best game of 2024 is a creepy puzzle game called Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I used to be really big into ARGs and viral marketing campaigns. I was deep into Our Colony, the little time waster ARG that Microsoft used to launch the Xbox 360. More recently, in 2014, I was a daily player of an ARG called Ancient Societies. This was a secondary ARG marketing campaign for the book Endgame by James Frey, the guy who you might know for writing A Million Little Pieces. That book included an ARG within the book that eventually led to this cash prize at Caesar's Palace. In the past, I also spent hours reading about how the marketing team for The Dark Knight flooded the streets outside San Diego Comic-Con with players in Joker masks, and sent players to pick up cakes with cell phones baked into them. So I was primed to love Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Lorelei is like if Resident Evil got rid of all the combat and just amped up all the puzzles several notches, which frankly is my ideal version of Resident Evil. It's spooky at the exact right level that I can handle, and it's visually stunning in a way that I've not seen in a video game before. The game takes a story about an old Hollywood filmmaker and slips it into an aesthetic that merges all of these influences. It's rare that puzzle games meet me exactly where I'm at. Really, there's only been 2 that nailed my specific desires for difficulty and puzzle style, and those are Tunic and Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I devoured Lorelei over 3 nights, playing between my Steam Deck and PC, and while I'd prefer if the game changed up how the menu controls work, that never once broke my attention. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes gave me the same feelings that solving daily puzzles in those ARGs did, but it did that every few minutes. It scratched my brain in all the right ways, and it did it all over a soundtrack that I listened to all of the time. Samogo has done it again with this game. Go play Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, but beware.
My 2024 game of the year is the Do Counter 2 remake. Now, a lot of people say that because it's a remake,
The best game of 2024 was a complete surprise to me. When I played the demo of Tactical Breach Wizards, I thought the combat was neat. I love a good grid-based tactics game. But while many people I knew walked away from that demo excited to play the full game, I didn't really feel any pull to actually purchase Tactical Breach Wizards when it came out. The humor wasn't bad, but it felt like it had the potential to be grating. The game is marketed as this irreverent action comedy, and that's just not really a thing I'm into. While the gameplay was great, it didn't really pull me in to get over that distaste either. But in this, the year of trying shit, as I've called it, I gave the full game a chance, and I'm happy that I did. I didn't expect a game like this to have characters as three-dimensional as these ones. The game dedicates an entire menu to side moments that are just character-building conversations between team members. There's these challenge missions, which are framed as anxiety dreams, where each character is working through something unique to them. Better yet, the game builds a world that is believable, or at least one that's familiar. There are haves and have-nots, and oppressors and oppressed. There are wars and the effects of those wars. The game is clear about its bad guys, but the rest of the people in the game, even seemingly unimportant NPCs, have an inner life and a reason to exist in the world. I understand how Medill relates to its northern neighbor, Kalan, and how the DSR, where the game begins, sits relative to Libeli, the country where one of our leads, Zan, grew up. I know the world powers and their desires. I remember how each of our leads feel about most of those places. This is simply not what I expected from this game. On a spectrum from sliding block puzzle to full open arena tactics, Tactical Breach Wizards sits right about here, like just to the right of chess. And normally, that's not my vibe. But Tactical Breach Wizards makes its units' mechanics so interesting and ties those mechanics to the characters they're assigned to incredibly smartly. I completed this game in 2 nights after starting it up on a whim, having let it sit there in my Steam library for weeks. The perfect blend of mechanical, character, and narrative depth hit me in exactly the right spot. You should play Tactical Breach Wizards. If you're a tactics geek, you're gonna find a game that challenges you and has those systems that can completely crack open if you're skilled enough. Or maybe if you just stumble onto the right combo. And if you're truly a mechanics-only, no dialogue kind of person, the game is gonna let you skip all of that. I wouldn't, but you do you. If you're more of a story person like me, then Tactical Breach Wizards might be for you too. Only you can know if that style of combat is gonna work for you, but what I'll say is that the base objectives are pretty approachable. And if you ever get stuck, the game lets you just skip an entire encounter without losing all of the context of the greater mission. You don't have to play the extra challenges either, a fact which the game reminds you of every chance that it gets. Play Tactical Breach Wizards. You won't regret it. The best game of 2024 is a gay romance sports visual novel. Sudden Death is described by its creators, Cecile Richard and Nat Pussy, as romantic sports fiction. It is a low-fidelity, high-polish, striking narrative about a below-average Australian football club and its players. It was made for the Bodies in Motion game jam held by Domino Club. They call themselves a loose collective of digital artists coming together to participate in anonymous game jams. On their website, Domino Club says that they are interested in small tools, web tools, low-tech tools, ditherpunk, low-poly, sustainability, narrative-heavy experiences, digital spaces, dark matter, Web 1.0, DIY, piracy, remix, being gay and doing crimes, goofing off, zines, skeletons, glitches, little guys, and whole. So when you think of Sudden Death, I hope that you keep those interests in mind. If a zine were a game, it would be Sudden Death. The game manages to establish setting and mood with simple static images crushed down to a handful of colors and overlaid with gradients. It tells a human story of a team of athletes and manages to focus deeply on several of the players, but also give you an understanding of the world outside and how people perceive the team from the stands. Sudden Death uses low-tech tools, music, and a visual novel foundation to create one of the most blood-pumping sports sequences that I've seen in media, much less in minimally interactive fiction games. It tells the story of Mitch and Jordan, two of the team's players who have incredible chemistry, but might also just be the worst possible option for one another. I could tell you what happens in the game, but it's 45 minutes long and it's free on the web, so you should just go play it. I'll put a link in the description of the video, and if you think I might like it, you're probably going to. Sudden Death shocked me with how great it was. I'm going to be keeping an eye on Domino Club because I believe our interests align. The best game of 2024 came out 4 years ago. I know, it's absurd to say that Yakuza Like a Dragon is the best game of 2024 when its sequel, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, actually came out this year. But Infinite Wealth just didn't hit me the same, and Yakuza Like a Dragon single-handedly made me love an entire genre of video games. Many have said this, but I think Ichiban Kasuga is the single best video game hero. He's goofy and kind of dumb, and he doesn't really know how to keep himself out of trouble, but he's also earnest, forgiving, and really, really funny. That this guy surrounds himself with a cast of other lovable, interesting characters is believable, despite the scenarios the Like a Dragon games put those characters into. Yakuza Like a Dragon takes players through a soap opera level dramatic story that, despite that comparison, has genuine heart and humanity, and also action sequences that never stop being cool. The game bounces between dynamic turn-based combat and, honestly, hours of cutscenes, but both of which never get boring. Between all of this, the game contains several mini-games, although they're really only mini in that they're smaller in scope than the game that they're a part of. I personally could play a full $70 title of just this game's business management simulator and be perfectly happy having paid that price. I didn't love Infinite Wealth as much, but only because I don't think it ever reached the narrative highs that Yakuza Like a Dragon delivered. Like a Dragon is very explicitly a story about a formerly incarcerated guy trying to make a life, failing pretty spectacularly, and then doing everything he can to lift people up with him as he rebuilds that life. It should be no surprise that stories of how people can work around the systems that failed them would be interesting to me. It might not have come out in 2024, but Yakuza Like a Dragon is the best game that I played in 2024. I'm just so happy that I gave it a shot at all.
The best game of 2024 is Pacific Drive. On its surface, it's just a classic survival game. Go out, get resources, go back to your base, build stuff, rinse, repeat. The thing that makes it different is that you have a companion, a car. Now, I'm not a car guy myself, but I'm well aware of how attached people can get to their vehicles. I never really understood it until I played Pacific Drive. Pacific Drive does a fantastic job of taking an everyday object, your car, and giving it a unique personality through quirks it develops throughout the game. So everyone's car is different. Because of that personality, the object really leaves an impression on the player, much like how people form connections with their vehicle in real life. The game takes place in an alternate version of 1998, in the Olympic exclusion zone, which is a sort of super haunted / irradiated twist on the Pacific Northwest. I'm really fascinated by cryptids, and especially by Appalachian folklore, so obviously I found the cryptid car survival game super cool. Combine the connection you form with the vehicle, the Pacific Northwest cryptid vibes, the alternate history, and all of the characters you meet along the way, like Oppie, the jaded scientist, Tobias, the conspiracy theorist, and his husband Francis, who's also a researcher in the exclusion zone, and you've got a great experience that'll stick with you for years to come.
Okay, the best game of 2024 is the same game as last year. I told y'all. I f***ing told y'all. You thought I was crazy for calling the demo for a little card game my game of the year in 2023, but now I'm not the only one. Balatro is an all-timer that has taken its rightful place alongside Slay the Spire as deck builder royalty. This is a game made by a solo developer, Local Thunk, who was just making little game projects to enjoy with his friends. Local Thunk said the other day that the project on his computer is still just called Card Game. He wasn't trying to design the game that gave so many of us all this joy. He just wanted to make a silly game for his friends, and in that quest, he made an instant classic. Local Thunk and Balatro deserve every award, every dollar, and every good thing that has come their way. If you have somehow avoided Balatro until now, fix that. It's $10 on your phone and it's cheap everywhere else, and the joy that you'll get without ever being asked to spend another dime is plentiful. It's easily the most fun you're gonna have playing cards. The best game of 2024 has returned from 2006 to remind you that death is coming. When discussing Persona's calendar system, I often hear people say that it causes them anxiety. Something about having too many things that one can do on any given day and a limited number of days to do them keeps people away. This was the case for me for the first couple of times that I tried to play Persona 5 Royal. But Persona 3 Reload is about that tension between what we want to do and what we have time to do. It teaches you how to engage with its systems by narratively making you consider the time that you have left. Persona 3 Reload is the Persona game where I got it. I saw the thing that other people see in this series of games. It's a remake of a game from 2006, so this narrative I fell for has been there all this time. But it took this repackaging for it to work for me, and I'm glad that 3 Reload was there for me when I was ready. It's usually only once or twice a year that a game sticks with me and won't let go. This year that happened a few times, but Persona 3 Reload is unique even among those games. Part of it is that the characters in the game feel like people that I went to high school with, likely because we would have been the same age at the same time. But part of it is also because Persona 3 Reload is about making the best of the time you have, no matter how short or long that is. Persona 3 dares the player to live, despite the inevitable end. It begs you to burn your dread and commit to taking care of the people around you and letting them care for you. For a game where you are surrounded by people suffering from a disease called apathy syndrome, Persona 3 Reload is earnestly obsessed with giving a shit. Persona 3 Reload is gonna stay with me for a very long time. As long as I've got, probably. And I intend to take its lessons to heart. The best game of 2024 has one of the best narratives in video games. There's not a lot left to say about 1000 Times Resist that I or my friends at .zip haven't already said. Games like this one just don't come around that often. People keep comparing 1000 Times Resist to the game 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim as a way to point out the puzzle box aspects of that game. But to focus only on that stuff is to miss a large part of the picture. 1000 Times Resist is a game about something. It wants you to look at the ways that we hurt each other and where that harm originates. It wants you to see the ways the powerful make that hurting worse. Maybe most of all, it wants you to know that escaping our worst tendencies as a society is going to take generations, but that doesn't mean that the fight or the pain was pointless. That idea is something I saw in many places this year. Metaphor said similar things with its ideas about utopia, statecraft, and the long, hard fight to protect one another from self-interested demagogues. Tactical Breach Wizards told us a story about regular folks fighting powers much larger than themselves. Persona 3 Reload reminded us to rid ourselves of apathy and of fear, to burn our dread, and to continue on in the efforts of building a better world despite all of it. 1000 Times Resist baked all of that into a name. 1000 Times Resist is the best game of 2024 because it does all of this, and it is a mystery box, and a visual art piece, and a composition, and a cast, and a collective of creative elements and people that add up to something unbelievable. This is the first game from Sunset Visitor, people. I cannot wait to see what they're gonna make next. Happy New Year, everybody, and I'll see you in 2025.